Welcome, everybody. Thank you for the time today. This topic is exciting to me for two reasons. One, often security is either forgotten about or something that we don't have time for. And so I have a strong passion about helping organizations plot a course to a more secure environment, one that is not massively disruptive to operations, one that costs a bunch of money, and the beauty is Microsoft, particularly through Microsoft 365 and the related products in Office and the collective set of products we'll discuss today, has made that journey more simple and more cost-effective than ever. The other thing, of course, we used to talk about the most secure computer is one that's turned off and in your closet, right? I mean, it's not particularly productive, but it is secure. And so the reality of security is that it often is pitted against productivity and enablement. And so part of what is exciting about, I think, Microsoft 365 is it gives you both a more secure environment, more control over your data and your users from a risk and compliance perspective, but it's also part and parcel and hooked into, very well integrated into the productivity platforms that exist within 365. So I'm excited to share today. I think you know who we are. We do consulting and staffing. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but just wanted to thank you all for coming today. This is me. I'm the Chief Technology Officer. I often live in a circle. Just kidding. But no, it's phenomenal to have the opportunity to present today. Part of my role at Provisions Group is these things, in part because I get to live with a lot of you all fine people, serving you in your organizations, and so it's fun to share stories from the trenches. So we're going to take a four-pronged approach. If you've ever been in any of these webinars in the past, I kind of like 3 points in a poem. So I'll skip a poem today, but at least I've got four major topics to talk about. The first is kind of the backdrop of the challenge and the opportunity. The notion of this yin and yang, or light and dark, or whatever, of security and empowerment, enablement, high productivity is real. And so what's neat, as I said earlier, Microsoft 365 provides, in a sense, a way to meet both head on. We're going to talk a little bit. This is maybe a review for some of you. It may not be. It may be an opportunity if you don't live in the security world, or if you're not thinking about compliance and risk when it comes to digital experiences or digital information. And this hopefully will help acclimate you to the Microsoft 365 context, which is what we'll talk about in that third milestone of our discussion today. And then lastly, I want to leave you with a way that you all can be the heroes. So there's certainly some next steps you all can take. And in particular, one of the reasons why I felt compelled to give this talk today is, there was a time, if you all have been in IT for a little while or been around these conversations for a little while, there was a time in which Microsoft had a not a great reputation when it came to security, and this would have been 15, 20 years ago, right? But what's interesting is that has so swung the other direction that Microsoft has an overwhelming amount of offerings in even just what you get in Microsoft 365 through Business Premium. So part of what I want to talk about today is, or one of the reasons why I wanted to give this talk today, is to demystify and organize a little bit of the clutter, because there's a lot there. Not that there isn't more. I mean, we are going to only touch on a little bit of what's there, but hopefully in the conversation today we'll give some focus and clarity. So let's get on. So I think you all know this. I mean, clearly there's been a mass shift to remote work. COVID, of course, and the pandemic drove this. By the way, these were accelerating trends prior to COVID. But yeah, I mean, there's as much, particularly among white-collar workers, there's as much as 67% of us that work remotely. And that has led to, inevitably, a change in the threat landscape, right? You've got cybercrime that has had an explosive increase, up to 600% since COVID. The remote work has increased the average cost of a data breach. I mean, it's now the average cost is close to $150,000. So there's that impact. There's this is just an example, right? I mean, there's been lots of breaches and data theft and data privacy concerns in the past, but certainly even as relevant as COVID and a lot of us moving to Zoom or Teams or others. More than 500,000 accounts were stolen in the recent past from Zoom. So this is an interesting landscape. Oh, by the way, to interrupt myself, I do want to say this because it's important. You will see throughout this deck links. One of the things I tried to do for everybody on this call, in part because this was meant to be a primer, and in part because I wanted you all to have some homework you could use, or at least some materials you could use to reference. I have tried to link anytime I'm referencing statistics or in pulling in images or charts. I provide a reference both to give credit where credit's due, but also to give you guys a way to get to the additional details. So you'll see this underneath a lot of these. Hackers attack every 39 seconds. I mean, this statistic is pretty impressive. There's a few others on the right. 40% surge in global ransomware. I mean, in 2020, which by the way continues to accelerate. And by the way, this isn't meant to be a FUD talk, right? I'm not trying to wash you all with scary security and compliance and risk statistics, but yeah, suffice it to say, cybercrime is on the rise. Hackers are getting more and more sophisticated. And yeah, I mean, detecting, responding, containing threats in the organization is hard. One, because people are working increasingly in remote environments, and two, not to be too terse, but hackers are getting better. They're getting smarter, and some of that's relating to advances in technology. Some of that's, and by the way, we're, us white hat people living on the good side of the coin aren't the only people leveraging AI, right? So there's, hackers are getting increasingly sophisticated. They're also getting especially manipulative. There's social engineering going on in ways that, historically has always been the case, but again, with misinformation being a large part of the discussion right now, it is being leveraged for manipulation, for fraud, for abuse. So yeah, the threat landscape has gotten complicated. Now, the good news, I don't know if you all have, anybody's on this webinar today ever read this book by Nicholas Carr. By the way, I don't know him. It's not an endorsement of the book. I've read the book. But what I would say is, in it, he sort of lays out a thesis. And I'm probably abusing the thesis a little bit, but at a high level, if you're not familiar with the book, he's posing the somewhat reasonable question of people had at turn of last century, right? People who had electricity or indoor plumbing or indoor heating, they had a competitive advantage, right? Because few people did, and now everyone does. So the question is IT at its onset provided a competitive differentiation? Well, his question is, does it now, right? Because it's a commodity is largely what he would outlay. And I think the landscape within IT has changed so much, and that the notion that you can both have secure and highly productive environments, I think we are at not to say that I don't exactly 100% agree with Mr. Carr on this one, but I don't think IT has been highly commoditized, but I do think we are at a point of kind of human technology evolution that IT matters, because if you can enable a secure, scalable environment that also enables remote work and also enables remote collaboration and also enables sharing and communication, you are going to differentiate yourself, either because you won't be hacked and therefore be subject to some of the penalties and losses and fines that we talked about a minute ago, but also because productivity in a remote, highly distributed world is king. So let's talk really quickly. Again, I won't spend a lot of time on this because this might be a review for some of you, but here are some common threats. These are not the only threats, by the way, but just to kind of allow ourselves to have a table of contents or a backdrop from which to pull on in the subsequent section when we talk about Microsoft technologies that meets these threats or helps to manage these threats. I want to establish it, right? Phishing, it's not P-hishing. It is phishing. PH spelled, is sounding the, F sound, right? So you pronounce it phishing. It's when you click on it, I mean, all of you have been, at least hopefully not all of you have been phished, but all of you hopefully or presumably have experienced a phishing email, right? It's an email that appears to be legitimate. You click on the link that they want you to click on. Why? Well, because it looks like an email that would have been sent to you by somebody legitimate. And in some cases, there's a more narrow style of this that actually pretends to be a specific person. Might pretend to be your boss. Not to get too fun, but that's called spear phishing. But regardless, phishing, generally speaking, is when you receive a communication, could be an email, could be in text, that is attempting to mislead you, and really, hopefully, the attempt or goal of a phishing email is to get you to click or take some action that, if you recognized the sender, you wouldn't take. And as of 2022, as of 2020. 36% of all data breaches were caused by phishing. Ransomware. I don't think anything about ransomware is cute, but I do think the combination of ransomware has always made me chuckle because it's a little bit of a funny term for something so insidious. But yeah, I mean, if you don't know what ransomware is really quickly, it's basically a virus that when downloaded onto your machine or multiple machines, because of course, like a virus, it tends to spread itself out, can encrypt the data on your drive that the virus is infected, and then locks you out. The idea of ransom, right, is you end up paying, or the company or the hackers, so to speak, that are offering the ransom to get access to your data frequently want you to pay, usually a premium, to unlock basically your hard drive. So that's ransomware. Cloud data loss. In the move to the cloud, I'm speaking about like infrastructure cloud services like an Azure, an AWS, a Google. I'm also referring to all manner of SaaS, right? You've got things like Office 365 and OneDrive and SharePoint. You've got Dropbox. You've got all manner of other file sharing services. In that excitement to move to to this new wave of technology, and highly empowering, right? The notion that you might have the ability to host your data without necessarily having to build a SAN or set up a network storage appliance, it's phenomenal. But with all that power comes great responsibility. In 2020, there was a study that suggested that only 5%, I'm not saying that only 5% were messed up, but only 5% of folders in major enterprises reviewed had security entitlements configured properly. 5%. So that, I mean, we're not talking about this is 5% exception. We're talking about 95% was the rule. So that's scary, right? So mobile data loss. This is kind of interesting. So I don't know. You might be thinking, I just wanted to play a game. I just wanted to play the new Bubble Popper, right? And it looked interesting. And I was browsing the apps on the App Store, and I downloaded it. Well, there's a solid contingent of apps in the App Store that were written by hackers. By the way, there are games. You download them and you can play them, and they function as games. And you might not have any idea that when you were really excited to play Bubble Popper and you accepted the terms of this app that now has access to data that you didn't really mean for it to, but you kind of were like, I really want to play Bubble Popper, I'm going to go, that they are now in effect stealing your data. So 46% of orgs had downloaded a malicious app. And I say orgs, people in large enterprises. There was a multi-organization study done in 2020 that suggested this is rampant. And so the idea that not only do you have corporate data on your device, but also you have apps that were specifically engineered to not only steal data, but also to appear fun and engaging.
That note?
Oh, I got somebody unmuted. There's this notion of account hijacking. Up to 80%, I mean, I think you all know this, right? If I got your password and you don't have two-factor, I own your account. I mean, this is obvious, right? If I've got your username and password, I am you, right? So up as of 2020, recently as 2021, 80% of data breaches are due to poor password security. Selecting bad passwords, selecting easily guessed passwords, again, phishing, sharing passwords, again, that's up to 36% as of the prior year. But again, account hijacking is certainly a threat. And then this idea of manual safeguards. So by the way, I don't know how many of you on this call are actually security professionals, but if you are, you know this one, right? This is the idea that you might have an organization of 600, 800, 1,000, 10,000 employees, and there's a single or two security engineers. So the idea that and by the way, 93% of security teams, I mean, this is a statistic not taken across the entire world, but significant representation. And you'll notice, by the way, these links are not in this slide. You'll notice a superscript 1, 2, 3, 4 next to all these statistics. You'll see it in the slide notes where all these statistics are pulled from. But as of 2020, 93% of security teams are unable to address all the alerts the same day. So you got to imagine, even if, by the way, and I recognize that everybody's in this boat, but even if we're a reasonably staffed security team, even if we put in all the monitor alerting technology so that we should know that somebody's trying to hack us, hackers might even have more than 24 hours even when they're detected. Why? Because there's such a oversupply of information. There's so many automated bots and scanners and just candidly hackers out there, right? So there's so many, and some of these might be events and alerts that are stopped at the door, but if you don't have AI, if you don't have automation, if you don't have machine learning automating some of these controls, your security teams, which by the way probably started out understaffed, are not going to be able to protect you, nor is the technology that is alerting them to make protection. So one of the last of the 6 common threats is an understaffed security team combined with manual safeguards. So now we get to the goods, right? That was all the setup. We're 18 minutes in. I've got a clock. I'm watching the clock. So in case you thought I was droning on, here's the meat. What I plan to do in this discussion is talk about each of, you'll see this first slide does this, right? Each of those 6 security threats or compliance threats. And then we're going to talk survey level. I don't plan to do a detailed demo. We can, of course, if you want something like that, I'd love to meet with you and spend an hour with you doing a demo, walking you through the features in detail. But regardless, the purpose of today's webinar is to provide a survey level, cursory level understanding, and really sort of highlight some of the most important pieces. You'll notice, like some of my statistics, right? I'm not a statistician. I'm also not a graphics designer, right? So I pulled from Microsoft collateral that I thought was helpful. I did it for 2 reasons. One, I don't often do this, but one of the reasons I did it was I wanted you all to almost be able to recognize some of these things as you go out and you do your own research. As you're going out and you're reading, I wanted you to go, oh, I've seen that diagram before, because I saw it in Provision's webinar. But in a way, again, they've done a good job, but there's a lot there. So it's almost like the mall map you are here. There might be 300 stores in the mall, but it's helpful to know that, beep, this is where we are. So I want to give you a little bit of that today. So there's some of these diagrams were selected purposely that way. So when it comes to phishing, Microsoft has a product or a service that, by the way, if you're a Microsoft 365 Business Premium user, you already have access to, called Microsoft Defender for Office 365. It's a full suite. I mean, by the way, what we're going to talk about today is a suite of suites, right? Microsoft has a suite of suites, which is one of the reasons why this webinar hopefully will help some who struggled to sort of orient to the bulk of features that are out there. But this particular one is a suite of tools dedicated to the protection of email, and it splays out beyond that, and we'll talk about this in a minute. But largely, it's to deal with email security. And so when you're interested in better protection against phishing, you don't just have, by the way, I'm sure you all know this. If not, I will tell you, one of the best ways to protect against phishing, and one of the, I would say, necessary ways to protect against phishing, is training. So I'll say that. That's not a tool, right? But some things I think that are often overlooked, particularly because if you're not a security professional, it's easy to think of security and the security team as an outsourced service, so to speak, even if they're a department inside your enterprise, right? All the risk goes to die there. And so I sort of hope that I've got a good security team, and I hope that they've got good security tools, and that's where it stops. What I would tell you is, if you're really interested in helping your organization protect itself against phishing, you've got to engage in end user training, period. Because some of the best technologies, while they will help, your users need to be trained how to identify phishing emails. Because there's no amount of technology that's ever going to not allow one to slip through. And the one that slips through might be the one they click on, might be the one they enter their password in, might be the place where they, submit data or provide access to download ransomware or whatever. It's the one that gets through that you got to worry about. And the only way you protect against that one is through training. So, but now we're, this talk is about tools, right? So the Microsoft Defender for Office 365 is a full stack. A few things to call out. Is it starts with, by the way, you might say, wait a minute, you just pivoted. I did, because even before you get to Microsoft Defender for Office 365 and you're just using Exchange Online. Exchange Online does come with a few kind of tools here. It does try to help you, like, lots of email services, identify spam. It does, in fact, attempt to identify phishing by the sender or malware by the reputation or, somebody sending a bunch of email in your environment in bulk. It does attempt to solve some of those problems without this Defender stack. But it does stop at a certain place, and where it stops, the two levels of, and we'll go into a lot of detail here in terms of the differences and what you get and how, which one's right for you today, but that's where a follow-up session may be helpful. But where Exchange Online protection stops, Defender picks up, right? And so that's where the ability to protect against unsafe attachments, the ability to detect and protect against malicious links, additionally, the ability to understand and protect against attachments that may be coming from SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. Part of what the whole Office 365 ecosystem has done is a great service to those of us who frequently get big attachments, right? Is they've added this, include as link, don't include as attachment. The problem is that's also a potential place for malware to get injected, right? If I think, I'm clicking on a link that happens to be attached in my SharePoint environment, actually wrong, it's actually hijacked. So the Defender product provides additional safeguards against that kind of poisoning, so to speak. That's phishing. So the Defender product, which again, as I said, is a large stack and has lots of things, is primarily focused on protecting your email. Again, looking at these sorts of things, it can, in fact, if you go into Plan 2, even help train or simulate phishing attacks in a safer environment than actually just waiting for the hackers to phish you, right? So like this attack simulation training and being able to automate investigations. This is all again in Plan 2. But yeah, if you'd like to deep dive, please reach out. Topic number 2, product number 2, but on theme, right? So Microsoft loves to name suites of products consistently, which again can be helpful if you're trying to orient, but also can be a little bit confusing because it's like, wait, which Defender product am I talking about right now? Another Defender product, which gives you the ability to manage endpoints, and particularly protect against malware and viruses and ransomware, is a product called Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Now, this product, we'll talk about this in a minute. This product is largely targeting enterprise customers. There's actually a soon-to-be released. It's in preview beta testing right now, but a soon-to-be released product with similar capabilities targeting the SMB market. So, and again, we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I mean, this is where the ability to protect end-user devices. I mean, if you think about it, it's bigger than this, but you'll see this in this note right here. Anti-Malware Antivirus, right? If you've been in computing for any period of time, you'll remember the day when you gotta have Norton or you gotta have McAfee or you gotta have now in those days, you generally speaking, people never said, I gotta have the Microsoft virus protection product, because it wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't great at the time. I would say this product, which is inclusive of the product and set of services for the small to medium-sized business, is also very capable and well, not just well respected in the community as people continue to use it, but also it's proven itself. So things like the ability to discover devices on your network that maybe even shouldn't be there. And again, I think about BYOD, but also from an MDM strategy. There's integration into Intune, which we'll talk about in a later slide. If you're familiar with that, if not, we'll talk about it in a minute. But this is a very well integrated product for endpoint protection. I mentioned this coming soon product. That's Microsoft Defender for Business. You may see it. I mean, you are seeing it now, right? But you may see it in other contexts. And so I wanted to bring it up because if you are kind of like, wait, which is Defender and which is endpoint and which is business? Well, business is simply targeting a different size customer. And so if you think about it, Microsoft has made their Defender for endpoints what is in effect more accessible for small to medium businesses. And by accessible, I mean more cost effective. In fact, I believe, we'll need to check this, I believe some portion of this is actually going to be included in business premium licensing. So you may just sort of get it for free if you're already a business premium customer. The one thing I'll mention, you guys can do a side-by-side if you want. There's access in this enterprise product, this endpoints product, access to Microsoft experts on threat analysis. Not quite a SOC, but certainly the ability to reach out and get help with incident response remediation. That's conspicuously missing, probably for reasons that are obvious, right? They're targeting a wider base of customers. They're trying to take it to the masses. That's actually not included in the Defender. But for the most part on the tool side, it's feature parity. So anyway, there's ransomware. I've included this slide in part because I thought it would be helpful for people who were in that, of course, provisions group. We serve a lot of folks in the mid-market, and so I wanted to be careful to help you guys begin to position for Defender for Business versus these other two products, Plan 1 and Plan 2 of Endpoint. Just know this is kind of generally speaking what you're looking at. And again, what's beautiful about this is notice how many checks are in this less than 300 seat Microsoft Defender for Business column, right? I mean, it's effectively all the things, except, as I said, Microsoft Threat Experts, right? It's like, and then there's some threat hunting and data retention, features that are bolt-ons that you can add. But the idea is you get a really capable endpoint product for small and medium business. Let's talk about cloud data loss. Now it's important. I mean, this is I'm speaking from firsthand experience, right? When I've approached the Microsoft security products in the past, I have been easily confused because, we are a partner and we have access to all the things, which means when I go into our Office admin console and I start to really dig in, I kind of go, wait, where was that feature? And I know it's there, right? But it's like, I don't know if anybody's had a similar experience in Azure or AWS or one of the public clouds, but it's like, I know it's there, but where's the button and how do I navigate? No, by the way, they've moved it. And so, it's a little bit confusing. And so it's potentially confusing. So what I want to do now in this conversation is clarify that a little bit and say that these two products, you'll notice there's a reason for this, right? But these two products that we started with are in the Defender family. So they're under that security tab. Now we've crossed over into a compliance set of products. And so for data cloud loss, we'll talk about also mobile data loss. We talked about a minute ago during threats. These are compliance products, and so you'd find that under that compliance tab. Again, we talked about Defender being a whole suite of products. So is what Microsoft called Microsoft Information Protection, MIP for those who really like the Microsoft acronyms. And so there's this holistic strategy for, it's outlined here, right? Protecting your data, understanding where it is, where the risks are, preventing those risks from becoming a concern. Now, if you're like me and you're a little bit slow, it's helpful to be able to hold new concepts in relationship to other really commonly said things. So if you're wanting to think about Microsoft products, now it's bigger than this, right? But if you want to think about something you've probably heard about, data loss prevention, or DLP, comes in here. So if you've heard people say, we need a DLP solution, well, we'll talk about DLP in a minute, but just know that one of the products within this Microsoft Information Protection Suite is the data protection product, or DLP, data loss prevention product. And by the way, like Defender, there's actually a couple of flavors of the DLP product we'll talk about. But yeah, this is broadly speaking, now we shifted to compliance. And so we talked about data loss prevention. And so if you're worried about cloud data loss, and again, there's kind of two different, I actually won't get into this much on this call, but there's really two types of cloud data in the context of Microsoft cloud data loss. One is stuff in your 365 environment. So if you'll notice, this slide is focused on the things you know about in the Microsoft universe: Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams chat. Now you might think, well, what is it? Okay, I get it. I get what's in scope, but what does it do, right? Well, what it's going to help you do is identify places where people are sharing, potentially have access to, potentially are sharing with people we talked about this, only 5% of folders are configured correctly, right? They might be sharing it with people they don't intend to share it with. And so it's got a variety of classification and scanning technologies related, but also alerting and automated protection technologies around identifying data that's spread out across all these many sources and going, that looks like a social security number. That looks like a credit card number. That looks like whatever. And you can, of course, train the system to look for just about any type of data that you might consider to be secure. And again, it provides you not only automated controls and safeguards, but also identification, which in a large enterprise, particularly across all these products, can be really difficult to govern. And then lastly, it provides automated scanning and identification and classification, right? So the idea is this looks like a credit card, and that's a part of this set of data, and so therefore this is the plan that we're going to enact to kind of manage that. So if you think about data loss prevention, you can identify the sources, you can effectively enact certain actions to take place on those sources, and those actions are largely dependent on the sources, right? Think about like SharePoint, Exchange, OneDrive. You can block people who are outside of your organization from accessing content automatically. And so this is, part of, I intentionally linked the remediation with the threat, the Microsoft tool that helps solve the meet the need. But at the same time, there are a couple of these that are addressed simultaneously, right? Some of the automated controls in data loss prevention go directly to support that last threat, which was you've got a small security team. They only have so many eyeballs and so many hands. And so the more you can automate, the better off that team is. And so certainly data loss prevention, especially around automated security entitlements and safeguards, including blocking access, really helps you avoid the need for a human to see an alert and respond. I won't spend too much more on this slide, but feel free to come back with questions at the end. I talked about the fact that DLP is got a couple of different flavors. The two products that are especially relevant to this mobile data loss discussion, and again, we're still in the compliance realm. We're still in that MIP, Microsoft Information Protection space, is a product called Endpoint Data Loss Prevention, or Endpoint Dlp. Microsoft Endpoint Dlp allows you to do much the same thing that you would have done on your cloud, on your shares, right? In email and SharePoint and Teams, it allows you to have similar visibility on endpoints. And so the idea that you can install either the agent or cooperatively have it work with the Intune agent to identify potential risks. This is very important if you think about it, because how often is, and again, hopefully not often, but I think what we would all admit is it's more often than we want it to be. How often is it's not so much that a person has social security numbers or medical information on a OneDrive account, it's that they have it on their desktop, right? It's like, and it's literally on their, and I don't mean on their physical desktop, on their computer desktop, but the ability to see and respond and take action on that, even in places where they're not synced to any sort of cloud. Desktop may not have been a great example because OneDrive backs up the desktop and we'd be able to scan it with traditional DLP. But regardless, even corners of a person's machine that are potentially engaged in either risky or, this is not a threat I explicitly listed in the 6, right? But some significant percentage of breaches come through insider threats or people who are already employees of your organization. And so you need visibility frequently at the endpoint if you're going to make sure you protect against those threats. I go through here a little bit about some of the things Endpoint DLP will allow you to do. If you're interested in that or Intune, which provides a number of services up and beyond just the DLP pieces related to mobile device management and endpoint protection, it's certainly something to look at. Particularly relevant to Intune specifically is something called app protection policies. We talked about this bubble popper example app, right? You download it and you think, oh, what a fun game. Part of what, and of course this has impacted, if you've been around again in IT and some of these conversations, you will remember as people's smartphones became that much more capable and ended up on people's, corporate Wi-Fi networks. Of course, we have a slightly different problem with all the remote workers now. But if they were, if you brought your mobile app or your mobile phone that you just bought from AT&T or Verizon, and you just got on the network, right? This is the notion of bring your own device or BYOD. And so, of course, a lot of IT organizations for the last, say, 10 years have been worried about BYOD. But now the problem is slightly more nefarious, right? Because now, there is less, again, 67, I think it was, % of us are remote working anyway, so it's not corporate network we have to think about, but it is that I've got my corporate email. And oh, by the way, you just emailed me a file that's got PII in it, right? And that bubble popper app, because I was getting real sort of clicky, and I tapped through the installation process, I didn't realize that I was giving access to the full device storage on my phone. Well, the neat part about Intune and app protection policies is it allows you to draw effectively a box around your corporate data, even though that's not a device that you manage. And it allows you to basically protect not only that part of the device, but also, and again, this goes more into the bad actor scenario, right, where you've got an employee who's intentionally trying to steal data, prevents them from copying and pasting or moving files outside of that sandbox. And so, again, this is something as a leave behind you can review in detail, but the idea here is that it's not just about, early days MDM was a lot about and NACs and those sorts of things were about getting a BYOD device registered and on the network. It's not just that anymore, right? Particularly because, as I said, there may not even be an enterprise network that these devices are joining to. It may be that this is a fully remote worker, but he's got access to all kinds of things. By the way, his phone is connected and he's downloading it on his phone. So again, Intune and app protection policies are a great way to prevent against mobile data loss. So this is an interesting statistic. It's a bit overwhelming. 300 million fraudulent sign-in attempts to Microsoft services every day. 300 million a day just with Microsoft. So if you don't believe people are trying to hack you, there's a number, right? Now get this. You are 99.9% less likely to be threatened by that 300 million if you use multi-factor authentication. If you don't know what multi-factor authentication is, this is just the notion that in addition to your password, you need another factor, they call it. And so that could be that it texts you a code and you put in that code in your phone. Again, the reason for the factor conversation is a password is something you know, but then your phone is something you have. And so having something and knowing something are two different factors. And so you are 99.9% less likely to be compromised if you use MFA. Even, by the way, if your password is $$ WRD, right? There's lots of conversations in history about password complexity. But part of what is interesting about MFA, right, is now I can literally tell you my password and you can't get in unless you've got the other factor. Now, P.S. I would, as a responsible member of the IT security community, I would tell you don't ever tell somebody your password. And also, P.S. don't make your password $WORD. But yeah, I mean, the idea here is that MFA is the way that you secure accounts. By the way, I told you I would help you orient, right? We talked in the first two threats, we talked about the Defender products. In the second two threats, we talked about MIP, or Microsoft Information Protection, and the related DLP products. Here we've shifted again. We're now really talking about services provided by Azure Active Directory. Now, you may not know this if you're a Microsoft 365 customer, but if you are a Microsoft 365 customer, you are using some version of Azure Active Directory to hold your and protect your accounts. And so some of the security features I'm advertising today in these next two threats are really dependent. They're less dependent on specifically the other two. By the way, they're integrated, which is nice, but they're less specifically dependent on an Office 365 specific technology, nor are they necessarily dependent on Defender or MIP, right? But they are present in 365 because of Azure Active Directory. One other thing I'll mention, there's this feature. By the way, if you have MFA and you're using text messaging, and by the way, you happen to know, hey, my organization, it uses 365, you might care to know that there's a mobile app called Microsoft Authenticator. Microsoft Authenticator provides a much better experience than text message-based two-factor. Not only that, I mean, there's largely a code, and you don't have to enter a code. Once you're registered, you just hit approve, and then you use the sort of fingerprint that's already associated with your, iPhone or your Android phone. But the other thing, because by the way, something you have is also your thumb. If it's your thumb, I guess it could be your finger, whatever you're using for fingerprint. But the other thing that's true is there's this feature called Passwordless Auth, and it took me a second to wrap my brain around that, but it's and again, I'll go into detail with you guys if you guys have questions about this, but it uses only the Microsoft Authenticator app. And so what happens is it prompts you a code, you type that code, it prompts you in your browser, right? A code, you type that code into your phone, and then you provide your thumbprint, right? So it's still two-factor, it's something you know, and the something you know is the thing you just saw in the portal when you logged in, right? It's that two-digit 30, 52, whatever the number is. And then there's something you have is your thumb or your finger, whatever it is. And so it's still two-factor, but the beauty is you don't have to remember your long password anymore. So you make your password infinitely complex, and you don't have to remember it. All you really need is Microsoft Authenticator app and Passwordless Auth. So it's something to look into if you haven't already looked into it. So this gives you sort of a way to represent this in terms of convenience and security. Again, if you haven't already enrolled in either two-factor or Passwordless Auth with Microsoft Authenticator, this is a graph that sort of shows you, passwords by themselves clearly have the lowest security. Passwords with two-factor are, secure but slightly inconvenient. And Passwordless Auth, I can tell you I've used it for a little while now, and this chart does it justice, but I might even put it a little bit to the right on the convenience side because it's that nice. Last threat, right? We're closing out. We're home stretch. The last threat I'll talk about is the threat of manual safeguards. So we talked about this third bucket of stuff. These last two threats map to Azure Active Directory. So what's phenomenal about the Azure Active Directory product is it comes with, again, not just authentication, not just single sign-on. It's an authentication gateway. It's a phenomenally capable identity management, identity and access management product. But it also has automated protections through a couple of different features. One is called risk flagging or user risk policies. It allows you to identify users that are potentially compromised based on login patterns that are rooted in and based on machine learning models. If the system, you'll notice this is an example of a report, if the system detects that a user has entered into a high risk level, you can choose, and we'll talk about this in a minute, to automate response controls. For example, if a person, maybe it's only the executive team, maybe it's your overall staff, enters into a high risk level, you conveniently lock their account temporarily while you figure out the risk. And again, I say that it's automated, right? So the ability to automate that control, or you can leave it in audit mode and simply just allow these to alert. Now, we did talk about the overwhelming amount of alerts, and so obviously if all you're doing is alerting, you're not actually managing this manual safeguards threat. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a start. If you notice, there's this apply sign-in risk policy for automated mitigation. You can, as I said, win the system, and again, it's continuously learning patterns and threats and trends, and for example, if it happens to see you log in within an hour from a geography that is far greater in distance apart from each other, then you could actually travel there. Meaning you logged in, from Germany and from California within a couple hours of each other. It's going to flag you. Now, it can also flag you and block you, which is an appropriate response, and that's where applying these automatic mitigation steps is really phenomenal. So again, I sort of walked through that. Related to login, there's something called conditional access, which there's a number of ways you can conditionally give access to sign in. One of those conditional access levers is something called a sign-in risk policy. And so that allows you to basically say, if they are signing in and have a certain risk class, even if they provide accurate login credentials, block them. Like, that's not okay. And so this is, again, where manual safeguards are far ellipsed by these automated controls. In summary, as we round out today, first of all, again, thank you for the time. For these 6 threats, right? Defender provides a great solution for managing and responding to both automated and manual. And again, I can't underscore the importance of training people in appropriate awareness of phishing and other security measures. But at the same time, the technology is right. Defender for 365, Defender for endpoint, or coming soon for business, are great solutions for phishing and ransomware. Microsoft Information Protection, for cloud data loss and mobile data loss, particularly the 2 products we talked about. And then lastly, identity protection services as a part of Azure Active Directory, things like MFA and passwordless and sign-in risk policies are great protections against account hijacking, password theft, and again, the threat of so much information, almost a denial of service, if you're familiar with that term, of your security team. And so the ability to automate responses so that people who are receiving too much information to respond timely can deal with the most important threats in a timely manner. So that's largely it. I would say, what steps can you take? How can you become a hero? Know what you own. I mean, we can help you do this, by the way, but if you don't know what licenses you have in Microsoft 365, by the way, somebody is unmuted right now, if you don't mind mute. If you don't know what licenses you have, you should know. Considering investing in business premium. As a small to medium-sized business, again, we talked all the features we covered today, minus a couple that are like add-on SKUs. I think the DLP for endpoints might be or Endpoint Dlp might be a bolt-on, but for the most part, these are all features that come built into business premium. As we talked about very soon here, there's going to be an endpoint protection solution also built into that. But as an SMB, consider investing in business premium, and if needed, let us help you get there. If you're in a leadership or in an IT security or an IT manager role, really push MFA. I mean, one of the ways that we really beat back these breaches in terms of password theft and account hijacking is through MFA. 99.9%, right? Less likely to have your account stolen with MFA. So consider turning on MFA and enforcing MFA with conditional access, and then leveraging, as we talked about, conditional access to prevent high-risk logins. Go passwordless, right? I mean, this is an option in using Microsoft Authenticator with Azure Active Directory. It's a phenomenally convenient tool. It's also, as I said, if you can make your password really complicated because you don't ever have to remember it, that almost locks that door, and it doesn't throw away the key, but it at least puts it in a place where it's not as risky. People choose simple passwords because they don't want to forget them, and so if you can not really ever have to use them, the ability to put it somewhere secure, but not have to recall it every day is an ability, is where convenience and empowerment meet security. This is a recommendation I touched on. We talked about conditional access, but allow the sign-in risk and identity protection in Azure Active Directory, particularly in audit mode, to tell you where your highest risk users are. We have provisions group. We have a little bit of both, and so I frequently will get an email about somebody who potentially is being attacked. And so, the good news is for the most part, because of identity protection and risk, that's it's never an account that's compromised that I'm getting notified on. Obviously, I would if it was, but regardless, I'm frequently able to go into the portal and see accounts that have at least been attempted to be hacked. I had a conversation with one of our staff the other week about their account. All of a sudden, they had logged in from the UK, and as it happens, it was because of VPN, and so that worked out. Well, somebody's texting me, and my phone is vibrating. Sorry, everybody. And so yeah, the ability to know that and understand those risks, and then be able to know whether or not it's a false positive is really huge. We talked about app protection policies. Using Intune, I would start today, plan for it. I mean, it's not Intune, particularly because it impacts people's personal devices in many cases with BYOD and MDM. Can be a little bit complicated just logistically. It's not necessarily complicated technically, but I would start to plan for that, particularly if you're already licensed for it. It might be an interesting place where you've already paid for something that you're not using. And so, again, if you need some help thinking through that, we'd love to help you, but that'd be a place. And then lastly, again, even if all you're doing is getting visibility, I mean, having lived in a lot of these roles over time, I will tell you there was a day when SharePoint, just by itself, I mean, this is, never mind Exchange and online file shares and a number of other places, was the thing that would keep you up at night, right? Because you knew people, they were empowered to manage their own security, they could throw whatever they wanted into these shares. And so the idea that, again, the 5%, if shares are configured correctly, that resonates with me because I remember that being a huge threat. So the ability to just simply have visibility in terms of what people are putting, what types of data they're putting in different places, this is where DLP and Endpoint Dlp would be great, even if it's just in audit mode. So that's all I have for you guys today. Hopefully this has been valuable. Again, I think we have a little bit of time. Does anybody have any questions for me or anybody else at Provisions Group?
So Eric, David asked a question in the chat window. Can Defender replace Symantec Endpoint Protection Manager and/or Proofpoint, or what's your opinion on that?
I think it probably depends a little bit on which features you're using. So I hate to be like classic consulting and say it depends. I think the answer is yes. I mean, generally speaking, they play in the same space. Obviously, the answer is yes, and it's worth further conversations. I think the question is probably presupposing that there's a little bit of a requirements mapping, but yes, it falls into the same solution space.
And David, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask more or follow up on that question. Same with anybody. If you'd like to ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in here and ask any questions, or you can put them in the chat window as well. We've got a few minutes to go here.
By the way, go ahead.
Well, I did ask in chat a little earlier, and forgive me if it's you touched on it and I just didn't catch it. But
sure.
Here at PG, what level are we with Office 365? I know you said, are we at the Defender level, or is that available to us?
I can't. The problem is I can't see who's asking the question. When you said we at PG, who is that that's talking?
It's Tony, and yes, we have
Tony.
Tony, we have a full suite of the Microsoft products, so we're good there.
Yeah, we
are.
We
okay.
Do. And use them.
I was just checking. I wasn't positive.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we sorry, Tony. I half recognized, but I could be like, man, I know that voice, and it's weird. I don't know why it's done this to me. I don't know why it's done this to me in Teams. Usually it shows me all the video cuts, but I don't know. I guess I maybe I alt tabbed in a way that took it off. I'm flying blind, guys. But yeah, we've done, by the way, we have, and this is a testament to Ron and Greg and several others on our team. We've had, as a Microsoft partner for a number of years, we've had access to a lot of these tools. But part of the reasons why I'm especially passionate about this conversation today is because, as we have grown, like a lot of growing organizations, our threat, security, compliance conversation has become more complicated. I mean, we have more employees, we have more data, we have more, so we've had to sort of leverage more and more of these tools, which has been neat, right? When you go to the shelf and it's there, right, for you to use, then it's great. But honestly, we've had to apply and deploy and turn on and tune a lot of these products, even internally, in the last, say, 2 to 3 years. And so we've gotten lots of perspective there. And so we'd love to share, but yeah, Tony, we're good. We've done a lot actually in the last 2 years.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, what other questions does anybody have?
Michael popped the question in the chat window. Does Defender for Endpoint require Azure AD joining?
Defender for Endpoint.
It does not.
It does not. Yeah, it does not.
Nope.
Thanks, Ron.
Sure thing.
No, it does not. That's correct. And that goes back. I mean, several of the products, and part of what's neat about the stack is it's almost engineered with cloud first or cloud native or whatever your sort of cloud idea is, with the notion of BYOD or the notion of this distributed workforce. One of the reasons, and of course I didn't get time to touch on it very much, that it is so friendly to the distributed workforce is, it's, I wouldn't say completely gone are the days of, everything has to be, quote, joined to something in order to get advanced features. But yeah, a lot of these technologies, particularly Intune and the DLP products are built assuming that you have, certainly far less control than you ever did over the endpoint. But yeah, it almost accounts for the I'll call it the low touch devices. That could be BYOD devices, but it could also include fleet of machines that you just haven't decided to domain join in the traditional sense. Any other questions or comments, guys? By the way, I should have this on my slide. If anybody's done or used or deployed any of these technologies, we certainly love to hear from you after this call. But any success stories to share, or horror stories? I mean, that's not exactly a fun thing to. But anybody got a story to tell about deploying any one of these technologies for the team?
I can speak to Defender. We used it this is Justin we used it quite a bit for at least a couple of years.
Can you hear me okay? My mic was up over my head.
Yeah, we got you.
So we actually just recently switched off of it. We loved it. We thought it did a great job. We had trouble with analytics, and maybe that was a lack of knowledge of Defender. But I was wondering if you or anybody could speak to that, analytics from a Defender perspective.
Yeah, what kinds of analytics were you trying to get, or what kind of analytics, now that you've left, so to speak, do you leverage on a daily basis? So by the way, if you don't mind sharing, what did you leave to? Like, what is your,
we ended up going to Carbon Black, and we were with Carbon Black from a day-to-day admin perspective. We were able to dig in really easy to what was detected and really dig down into the processes and where it branched out and what other things affected or were affected by whether an infection or a detection. Obviously we were always thinking, was that the right move? I was wondering if you had any insight into the Defenders, kind of digging in and the analytics from that point.
Yeah. So from an endpoint perspective, part of what also makes the suite of all these tools a little bit, not counterintuitive, but a little bit more complicated than I think Microsoft continues to, I'll call it, integrate and pull in and refactor, and both for clarity but also for integration purposes. And so some of what it's almost hard to talk about Defender in isolation, because so much of the of the other tools we talked about. A product like Intune that gives you more specific intelligence on the individual devices, or other agents that are part of the stack. And I guess what I'm saying is the Defender product is continuing to be improved, but also Microsoft has taken such a strong ecosystem perspective that it's often it's almost hard to know, was that a Defender deficiency, or is that a deficiency related to the other products that were either not known and not leveraged, or simply not implemented? Because again, some of these products, while they fit well together, they're also a la carte. And so, part of what might get interesting, and I think I recognize the voice. That's Justin. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. Good. It's like a game for me. But no, I think what might be interesting is if we sat with you a little bit and almost did like just a quick crosscut and mapped the kinds of scenarios you're describing. Because some of what went through my head, the reason I brought up the whole ecosystem play, is some of what went through my head is I could imagine pivoting to multiple tools in the full stack ecosystem. I'm not saying you have to deploy everything. I'm just saying there's a lot there, and so if you have them all, there's a lot of tooling you can use. And so it's possible some of what you wanted is not necessarily missing from Defender as much as it is just in a different part of the stack.
Yep. Well, and that's why I asked. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, Justin, as I say, yeah, Eric, as I say, and Ron, maybe, is this a point where a combination with Azure Sentinel for more of a SIM and log analytics platform to help do more of a correlation of events would be beneficial than just looking at Defender by itself?
I mean, I think there's, Ron and others speak up, but I think that's where the ecosystem play comes in. It's also a question of, like, part of it is I hate to say there's a philosophy here, but yeah, it's a little bit about how you want to think about incident investigation and response, because sometimes that happens with us. If you've got a SIM and you're going the more SOC route, where monitoring and investigation happens sort of, I'll call it definitively outside in other tools. Yeah, Sentinel-1 certainly the play. Or if you're used to sort of having, I'll call it real-time intelligence baked into agents on individual devices, there's that lens or cut. And so again, it's a little bit situational. But yeah, I mean, all the things, all the things from the security perspective are certainly more valuable than one. Anything to add to that, Ron? I don't know if you're muted or gone.
I'm not sure if Ron's still with us, but
yeah,
this is good conversation. Yeah. Eric, thank you. I know we're over time, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time today. It was great to have everybody join us. Thank you for a wonderful presentation and such elaborate content and a way to dive through the details. The last thing we want to do is Megan during the event was doing a randomizer of the attendees for a raffle of the things today. So we have the Microsoft headphones and also a set of Microsoft earbuds. The first winner that was selected from the wheel of names randomizer was Chris Hood. Chris from Tractor Supply, are you still with us today?
I am.
Awesome.
There you go, Chris.
You get the first choice. Which one would you prefer, the headphones or the earbuds?
Let's do the earbuds.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. That was great.
You're welcome. Megan will coordinate getting those to you, so you'll hear from her shortly. And then the second randomized winner was David Jones from Beckett and Lee. Are you still with us?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. You both will be hearing from Megan, and she will coordinate with you to get you guys those giveaways for Microsoft Day. So thanks again for everybody joining us. If there's additional questions, feel free to reach out to your representative here at Provisions Group. We'd be happy to talk to you, schedule additional time from our security experts to dive deeper into any of these topics at any point. So thanks again for your time today. We appreciate it. Have a great day and a wonderful afternoon.